So kicking off, Gaia, thank you very much for having this call to talk about D&I. I know you and I have spoken many times. Just to introduce myself, so I'm Kieran, the Technical Director at Sparta Global, and I won't speak for yourself, Gaia. Over to you.
And I'm Gaia Caruso. I'm D&I lead at Sparta Global.
So following straight on from that, I mean, I know, as mentioned, you and I have discussed on many occasions the D&I role, and I was very honest in the early stages. I actually struggled to see what you had to do. It was very hard for me to kind of pin. Wow, where do you even begin with that? As we talk about new roles appearing out there in the world, whether that's technical or business based, this is a completely new world. So I guess my question to you, what does your role currently entail, and also what are you now bringing to organizations and clients and partners that we're working with?
Yeah, and I think it's a great question, and you're absolutely right. D&I is a fairly new area of research and a very interesting one. So D&I at Sparta Global sits within HR, and although it is fundamentally a people role, it's also very connected with other areas within the organization. So, for example, we work very closely with our client partners and with companies in industry to provide ongoing support, advice, and feedback on how the Sparta Global business model can help them achieve their D&I targets. And we, of course, also work internally with our own talent and universities engagement teams. We have a wonderful network of over 70 universities that we work with at the moment, as well as D&I forums, student societies and communities, both nationally and internationally, and partners with whom we run a lot of events and with whom we lead D&I end-to-end projects. And by that I mean companies like Code First Girls, with which we team up and foster digital education for women in the UK, which is incredibly important. And then finally, we produce a lot of research internally. We write a lot, which I personally think is incredibly important. I think it's really important to keep learning from everything that we do and to keep sharing that knowledge with our clients and community champions. And so we have a lot of clients, consultants, and trainees who regularly write and effectively speak up on topics like gender justice, but also race at work, neurodiversity, social mobility, and so on and so forth. Really making sure that Sparta remains that thought leader in D&I.
And on top of that, I mean, there's a point you raised during that actually quite resonated with me and may have resonated with others. In the you mentioned targets, that companies have targets now. Can you elaborate on that a little bit further and what you're finding across the client base and what that target really means to an organization?
You're absolutely right, and it's such an interesting question. I was speaking with one of our clients just the other day on this very topic, and they are as invested as we are in this topic because they've recently implemented a new D&I approach into their talent agenda, and they have immediately seen the results from a revenue growth perspective. And I'll give you a few examples just to ground that concept. From a talent perspective, we know, based on research, that 47% of millennials and Generation Z candidates actively look for D&I as a key decision factor when they have to consider whether to join a potential employer or not, which means that companies who want to engage, attract, and retain the new generation of talent going forward will need to prove and demonstrate that they've got a very strong D&I agenda in place. And I think a lot of companies, including companies in that network, are seeing that and waking up to that fact a lot more. But also, when we look internally, internally within a company, we see, and again, this is based on research, that more diverse teams outperform less diverse teams by anything in between 19% and 25% because of innovation. In other words, when people feel really included and feel that they can speak up and be themselves, they achieve their full intellectual potential, which means that they are more collaborative, more creative, and as a result, innovation tends to be enhanced across the organization. And so we really see a direct correlation between D&I and the way in which it really harnesses the power of different experiences and the power of different perspectives in the company.
I just want to jump in there because there's another bit that kind of resonated with me. I think it's for someone like me, not purposefully, I kind of naturally fell into the pattern of, well, it's, you know, the D&I piece is about recruitment or people, but it's also about the individuals that you're already working with. And I think a bit that really, again, resonated with me was the fact of making people comfortable in that environment. Because one of the questions I had, you know, I always want to know about data to back things up and explaining why. And you mentioned 47% there. You know, without sounding too crass, you know, we see adverts out there, you know, 87% of people would buy X, you know, based on 89 people. But what kind of, you know, basis are we getting that data on? Or do we know the scale? Do we have any perspective? If we put the percentage aside, you know, how many people are we talking about?
Yeah, so it really depends on which sector you're looking at, and obviously the type of research that you're basing those insights on. We look at the technical sector primarily at Sparta Global, purely because we are a tech company. We want to learn how to produce better technology by implementing D&I. But I think this is true across every sector. We have a lot of clients in insurance, finance, and public health, and we're actually seeing very, very similar results. But, you know, even when we look on a larger scale, and I'll give you another example, and this is perhaps very relevant to what's happening right now in the world. As we speak, at this very moment, we are going through a terrible pandemic, which is affecting millions of people around the globe. Technology is being produced and used as we speak to tackle that problem. And I was reading just the other day about some wonderful apps and websites and technical products that are being designed at this very moment to share important information with the public, to give people access to the information they need to keep safe and keep their families safe. And when I think about those technical teams meeting as you and I speak right now to produce technology that is supposed to help us tackle a problem on such a large scale, it becomes immediately clear to me that we need complexity of thought around those tables, and we need diversity of thought around those tables to be able to produce technology that will actually be accessible to everyone. So, for example, if we have people from different socioeconomic backgrounds around those tables, they may be able to point out that the technical product being designed will be distributed, accessed, and used in very different way, depending on the socioeconomic environment you look at. If you have someone at that table able to point out that the app being produced isn't actually a good fit for a user who may be visually impaired, then obviously you as a company, you as a society, can tailor that technical product in a way where it will be accessible to everyone and the way that it should be. When I think about it that way, and when we ground it that way, it becomes very clear to me that we simply can't afford not to have diversity and complexity of thought if we really want to be able to produce technology that will be accessible, thus effective, thus helpful for everyone.
Okay, I know a mildly challenging question now. You mentioned about accessibility. I mean, the government do have accessibility practices out there for websites that ideally they should use and go to. I know that Google recently started mapping things as mobile first. I know there have been discussions in the background about accessibility. So, you know, are we saying that people are not doing enough? You look at this pandemic. Are you kind of lining this pandemic that you wish that the same effort would be going into D&I as it would for something like this? Or
I think D&I, especially in technology, is work in progress. I think some wonderful results have been achieved and some wonderful new methodologies, and a new awareness really to accessibility, for example, is definitely visible these days, as opposed to just a few years ago. But I do think it's work in progress. I think the whole D&I concept requires a lot of listening, a lot of observing, a lot of challenging bias, and sort of constantly trying to strive for better results. I don't think it can ever stop. Just like technology is never going to stop, it has to get better, because it's the only way that we can produce products that will help us effectively write a better world, I think.
Absolutely. Just to start to close out now, I think there are going to be, as you know already, there are a lot of companies and out there now that are looking at bringing in D&I leads and roles, and maybe those companies have got a good structure set up behind them to handle this. But what top 3 tips would you give to any other individual walking into a D&I lead, or any role for that matter, to kick off and help their company get started? So just overall synopsis, 3 bullet points to help them hit the ground running.
It's a big question. And for everyone walking into the role of a D&I lead, I would say first and foremost, observe what your company needs, and set up very clear targets and build your strategy around those targets. But if I can perhaps build on your question, I think D&I has to be a core value for everyone across the organization, not just management, not just D&I leads. And so when we look at everyone at every level of any organization, my top 3 tips probably would be show respect. As simple as it sounds, show respect to everyone, no matter who they are, no matter where they come from. Everyone deserves an opportunity to thrive at work. Everyone deserves an opportunity to be seen for who they are. But I think that can only be achieved if we all collectively protect each other's right to be listened to for who we are. And I would also say, and this is such a simple statement, but I think still very overlooked sometimes, our differences are our assets. Look at differences as assets. Find the courage to keep learning from people who have a completely different point of view. It's such a simple concept, isn't it? But I think sometimes it's courage. Find the courage to keep learning from someone who's very, very different from you. I think it's just as important in life as it is at work. And finally, perhaps on that note, be an active ally. If you see behaviors that you think are not accessible, are not acceptable, if you pick up on language or comments that you think are humiliating, isolating, or even bullying people, find the courage again to speak up and call those behaviors out. Be a role model for everyone around you.
Okay, I mean that's a lot to take on there, and I think just to wrap up a little, it's clearly not an easy role, right? You're going to be going into a lot of companies that are potentially starting from scratch. So I think your points around courage and listening, and actually I think the strategy piece is cool. Is core. Sorry, not core. It is cool too.
It's cool too, and core.
So the strategy piece, I mean, we've got quite a few points there, and I'm sure people can go back and listen through this video. But it is a difficult role, a courageous role to be walking into. Thank you for taking the time. I'm sure everyone will be appreciating your points. We'll get this video out as quickly as possible, and I'm sure it's going to add a lot of value to a lot of people. So thank you very much.
Lovely to chat to you and get your input too. Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Cheers, Gaia. Thank you.
Bye.